You ever get frustrated when someone just wouldn't stop talking about some stupid thing you don't care about? You've got your own problems in life, but they just keep yapping on about their job or their relationship troubles, like there's no off switch. Suddenly you feel your blood starting to boil. You might feel tempted to lie and get out of this. You've got to go, or your mom's calling and she's sick, it's an emergency. Maybe you could tell them you got a traumatic past and what they're telling you is actually seriously upsetting you. Or maybe the frustration gets so bad you might even think perhaps a punch in the face would shut them up. If that sounds like you, we're sorry to say you just might be a sociopath. In this episode of the Infographic Show, we're diving into the shocking reality of a condition that might already be shaping your thoughts and behaviors without you even realizing it. A doctor only needs to identify 3 key traits to make an official diagnosis. So before you start questioning your sanity, stick around, because what you're about to learn might completely change the way you see yourself. Before we dive into the list, here's the first bombshell. Sociopath isn't even real medical terminology anymore. When a crime drama detective calls someone a sociopath, what they actually mean is the person has antisocial personality disorder, or ASPD. The term sociopath was first coined in the 1930s, with socio referring to the belief that this condition stemmed from social and environmental factors rather than genetics. In other words, they believe sociopaths weren't born, they were made. However, the term sociopath became a popular relic of the past when antisocial personality disorder replaced it in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM for short, in 1980. ASPD is one of the 4 cluster B personality disorders, along with borderline, narcissistic, and histrionic personality disorders. What exactly is antisocial personality disorder? Well, it's all there in the name. People with ASPD chronically behave in a way that goes against the generally accepted rules of society, often to the detriment of those around them. These traits are likely to manifest in a person before they turn 15, though you have to be 18 for doctors to make a proper diagnosis. Will just having the condition turn you into a serial killer or a criminal mastermind? Probably not. While plenty of violent criminals have shown symptoms of antisocial personality disorder, the idea that it naturally predetermines you to be a major menace is pure movie magic. Like most personality disorders, it's a broad spectrum that encompasses both severe and minor symptoms. However, even on the more minor end, people with ASPD can cause serious hardship for their families and friends, and even as you'll find out later, be a bigger danger to themselves than anybody else. Now let's get into the signs, starting with the rarest, and heading down to the ones that you might even be doing every single day. Number 9. Failure to conform to social norms and laws. This will only get truly severe in the more extreme edge cases, but it's not uncommon for people diagnosed with ASPD to have a history of committing crimes, or at the very least breaking the rules. If this doesn't describe you, ask yourself for a second, why? Why don't you break rules and laws whenever it's convenient for you? It'd certainly make things easier than if you lived a purely honest life, right? But in all likelihood, you probably worry about 2 things. 1, that it would hurt other people and make you feel guilty, and 2, that your crimes might end up having an adverse effect on you, like getting into legal trouble. Someone with a severe case of antisocial personality disorder wouldn't share these reservations. We'll get a little more into why later, but people with ASPD will have trouble both realizing how their actions will make other people feel and connecting their actions to long-term consequences. Take shoplifting from a mom-and-pop grocery store, for example. If you had ASPD, you wouldn't stop to consider how stealing might hurt the owners or put their livelihood at risk. You also wouldn't be worried about the consequences of getting caught. The only thing on your mind would be scoring free stuff, maybe even the rush of breaking the rules. And if all of this sounds like you, well, that's strike 1. Let's see if you keep up your batting average as we proceed. Number 8. Consistent irritability and aggression. We all get pushed a little too far sometimes, nothing wrong with that. Anyone who tells you that they never get angry is either a liar or Bob Ross. But if you find that you seem to get irritated or angry at almost anything, even if it doesn't really inconvenience you, then it might be a chronic symptom of antisocial personality disorder. If you're quick to get physical when you feel insulted, even over something as minor as someone giving you a funny look, that is not a great sign. The same goes for frequent explosive arguments, especially if you've almost always been the first to start yelling. Having a short fuse like this can be indicative of ASPD, especially if you often channel your anger and aggression to get results you want out of people. Though we'll get into how that might be a small part of an even bigger sign later on. Sure, everyone loses their temper now and again, but if you frequently find yourself in a full-blown uncontrollable rage, that's different. And if none of the other symptoms apply, you might be dealing with something else entirely, like intermittent explosive disorder, IED, a condition that makes it difficult to regulate emotions. But the next entry is one that seriously bumps up the potential that you might really have ASPD. Number 7. Lack of remorse. This is probably the trait you expected the most. After all, it's the one most commonly linked to so-called sociopaths in movies or TV shows. Earlier, we mentioned that one of the main reasons you probably haven't turned to a life of crime is guilt. That nagging feeling that tells you that you've done something wrong and maybe you even hurt someone. People with antisocial personality disorder will have real trouble accepting that same idea. Here's the thing. Mental health isn't something you should view in black and white. It's more like a series of sliders in a video game character creation menu. That's what some people mean when they talk about something being a spectrum. Someone with ASPD might feel remorse selectively rather than not at all. Many people with the disorder have said that they do feel remorse if they hurt someone close to them, but they have a hard time feeling it with strangers or acquaintances. If you've ever been hit with the classic internet hypothetical, would you press a button that kills a random stranger but it makes you rich? And your answer was always an instant yes, well, this might be a red flag, especially if that same mindset carries over to how you treat people in real life. But a lack of remorse might be second only to one other sign when it comes to your expectations for this video's content. And that sign is number 6, difficulty with empathy. Even if you ask the most sheltered person you know, what do you think is the primary trait of a sociopath? They're likely to respond low empathy. It's common knowledge on the web and probably the one fact everyone watching this felt like they could confidently state before they even clicked. But what exactly is empathy? It's a word that's been thrown around a lot over the last few years. You probably even have at least one really annoying friend who likes to call themselves an empath. But in a scientific sense, empathy is the innate ability in most people to share a feeling that someone else is experiencing. If a person is feeling sad around you, you might feel sad too. Or if they're angry, you might find yourself getting worked up as well. The really important thing about empathy that you must understand is that it isn't the same thing as sympathy, nor do the two necessarily coexist. Sympathy is feeling a sense of concern for a person and desiring their well-being, even if you don't actually share their feelings at the time. It's often been said that the low empathy experienced by people with antisocial personality disorder makes it easier for them to hurt others without feeling bad about it. But it's important to remember that empathy isn't always a positive trait. You might have a friend going through a tough time who could really use your support, but instead of reaching out, you avoid them, worried that their mood might bring you down because of your own innate empathy. As a result, they struggle alone and nothing gets better. A person can feel sympathy without empathy, as many people with ASPD do, just like someone who can experience empathy without sympathy, as we saw in the last example. It's a valuable way of realizing that low empathy isn't just shorthand for evil in most situations. We still have 5 signs to go, and trust us, these next ones might really make you question yourself. But before we get to those, here's a big question we can't ignore. What actually causes antisocial personality disorder? Do we have any idea where it comes from? As we mentioned earlier, when the term sociopath was first coined in the 1930s, experts believed social factors were the biggest cause of these disordered personalities. But nearly a century of research has revealed a much more complex reality for people with ASPD. Twin studies, genome research, and neurochemical analysis all suggest that genetics may play a far bigger role in developing ASPD than experts once believed. Disrupted hormone patterns are also thought to play a role in some cases, as well as neurological issues affecting the very structure of the brain. Building on this, there have even been cases of people developing extreme antisocial behavior after experiencing head trauma. Take the tragic case of professional wrestler Chris Benoit. After a lifetime of head trauma and repeated concussions from his high-impact career, he committed an unthinkable act, taking the lives of his wife, his son, and himself. That is antisocial behavior at its most extreme. Of course, social factors still play a major role in the development of antisocial personality disorder. A difficult childhood marked by neglect, emotional distance, or abuse can significantly increase the risk. Children also tend to mirror the behaviors they see, so those raised by parents who consistently display antisocial traits are far more likely to adopt them as well. Childhood trauma can also increase the risk of developing ASPD. Emotional and physical abuse have often crossed over with individuals who've received the diagnosis, though strangely some studies have also shown that overprotective parents also increase the risk of developing the disorder. Regardless of which extreme their caregiver gravitated towards, in most cases you'll find that someone diagnosed with ASPD in adulthood will have had extremely troubled relationships when they were young. Speaking of troubled relationships, number 5, difficulty sustaining long-term relationships. Look, we're not here to judge anyone's love life. We're sure all of you are total catches in the dating game, but just to be clear, this sign isn't about romantic relationships. It applies just as much to friendships and even family dynamics. Taking a look at the signs we've explored so far, criminal tendencies, anger issues, lack of regret, and empathy, and you can start to see how someone with severe antisocial personality disorder might be difficult to know. People with ASPD often have superficial relationships, lacking emotional depth or real intimacy, more like distant coworker than a close friend or a romantic partner. While this isn't true for everyone with ASPD, some can be actively abusive partners due to their short temper, their need for control, and tendency toward emotional manipulation. We'll get into more depth on that later. In these extreme cases, their partners are naturally motivated to end their relationships as soon as possible to protect their mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Though the collapse of these relationships is often a lot less spectacular than that, the lack of emotional availability and sincere investment in other people will often lead to the relationships of a person with ASPD falling into disrepair and naturally drifting apart. This, in turn, leads to the person just seeking more superficial transactional relationships. It's a vicious cycle that often leads to someone with ASPD living a lonely life. But when it comes to how a person with antisocial personality disorder can be dangerous to themselves, that is nothing compared to our next two signs. Number 4. Impulsivity and poor planning. Earlier, we mentioned that people with ASPD often struggle to grasp the long-term consequences of their actions. That's where the sociopaths you see in movies and TV as calculating criminal masterminds are usually a far cry from reality. In reality, someone with ASPD will often have a real aversion to long-term planning. They'll likely prefer to make choices on the fly, even if they end up screwing over others or themselves in the process. When they do plan, they often set unrealistic or overly optimistic goals, for what they can achieve, that is, when they even bother to plan at all. Most of the time, they'll act on the first thought that happens to pop into their brain during any given situation. They might impulsively break off a friendship or a relationship because they feel bored or trapped. They might quit a job that they don't find interesting, even if they don't have any alternative ways to make money and support themselves. Risk-seeking behavior is also often the reason that people with ASPD fall into lives of crime. They might impulsively steal something that they want instead of waiting until payday, or jump straight into violence to settle an argument instead of talking it out. Incidentally, this sign can also be one of the major driving forces behind the next one. Number 3. Addictive personality. Drugs, alcohol, gambling, reckless spending. People with antisocial personality disorder are far more prone to addiction than most. This is largely due to their inability to consider future consequences and their constant need for immediate thrills and gratification. When it comes to chemical addictions like drugs and alcohol, it can also be a misguided attempt at self-medication, especially for traits like explosive rage. The nature of addiction can often trap people with antisocial personality disorder into more vicious cycles that make the rest of their traits more severe. The side effects of addiction can take a toll on their relationships. The need to fund an expensive habit can force people into a deeper life of crime. The impact of alcohol and drugs on the brain can make people suffering from addiction even more erratic and emotionally unstable, as well as making them even more impulsive and unable to think in the long term. Addiction can be an extremely difficult struggle for a person to tackle at the best of times, but the next common trait of people with antisocial personality disorder can make it even worse. Number 2. Deceitfulness and manipulation. This is another common part of media presentations of sociopaths that isn't actually that far off the mark for people suffering from ASPD. They often have a tendency to engage in lying and to use deceit and manipulation, from guilt-tripping to gaslighting, to achieve their desired ends. People with severe ASPD often struggle to grasp how much their deceit harms their friends, family, and even unsuspecting strangers. This trait is especially common in those who grew up in neglectful or abusive environments, where lying and manipulation became a crucial survival tool that carried into adulthood. Not that those reasons make it any easier to be on the receiving end. We've got just one more trait to reveal, and it's probably the last thing you'd expect. But if you've already checked off more than 3 and your life experience matches what we described earlier, you might be feeling a little uneasy right now. Do I have antisocial personality disorder? Am I doomed to always be like this? These are all reasonable fears to have, but let us ease your worries. Psychiatry and psychology have come a long way in the 45 years since ASPD entered the medical lexicon. There's now a number of ways that professionals treat the disorder. Treating ASPD is notoriously challenging, as those with the disorder are often resistant to therapy. However, with a strong support network and patient professionals, long-term talk therapy can make a significant difference. One effective approach is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which helps individuals recognize and change harmful thought patterns and behaviors. Another option is mentalization-based therapy, or MBT, which focuses on understanding how one's mental state influences their actions. There's even TC, therapeutic communities, which are particularly helpful in prisons. These communities offer a structured environment where individuals with ASPD can build a support network and develop pro-social behaviors alongside others in similar situations. And while there's no direct pharmacological cure for ASPD, there are a number of medications that can ease certain symptoms of the disorder and make overall treatment more effective in the process. Antipsychotics like risperidone can help curb your aggressive tendencies, as well as SSRI antidepressants like fluoxetine. Mood stabilizers like lithium have also been earmarked as strong contenders for this, and some doctors have also been prescribing anticonvulsants like carbamazepine to improve impulse control. So that's the good news. Help is out there. And studies have shown that while most of the extreme behavior of people with ASPD often comes out during a person's 20s, they tend to mellow out in their 40s, even without all the treatments we just described. But to get better, you first need to admit that you've got a problem and take accountability for the ways your actions have affected other people. Oh, and that reminds us. Number 1. Blaming others for your mistakes. If you're going to tell us you've never done this, then we're afraid we're going to have to tell you to go back up the list and check off lying and deceit. We have literally all been here. We turned in an assignment late at school and we blamed a friend who was meant to come and study with us but was too busy. If you just gave a terrible presentation at work, maybe it was the rest of your team's fault for doing poor prep. The problems in your personal life are all due to your parents or your partner or your friends or the government. People with ASPD often have trouble taking accountability for their own actions, often blaming others for their mistakes, or just for not properly understanding their intentions. There's a concept in psychological studies known as the locus of control. This concept refers to how much control a person believes they have over their own life. Those with a strong sense of control are said to have an internal locus of control. They see themselves as responsible for their actions and outcomes. People with ASPD, however, tend to have the opposite, an external locus of control, where everything and everyone else seems to dictate their actions except, of course, them. If this video sounds a lot like your life, does this mean you're definitely a sociopath? No, of course not. You shouldn't act like a video is a diagnosis. This isn't TikTok. But if checking off a few of these traits proves anything, it's that all of us can be a little antisocial sometimes. So how many of these traits did you check off? Did any of them surprise you? Let us know in the comments below. Now check out 6'9" brilliant psychopath who hunted college students, America's most evil serial killers. Or watch this instead.